Hello, everybody, and welcome to the DenziBlitz. I'm Mike. You may be wondering why I'm standing in front of some aluminum siding, and that's because I'm recording this on my carport. The geek room has been dismantled, so we had to make room for something else to go in that bedroom. And so you may hear cars passing by, or dogs barking, or roosters crowing. It's really early in the morning. So this is the last part of our look at Kamen Rider Decade. Now, I'm going to be perfectly honest. I don't have episode titles in front of me this go round, and I may accidentally cover the same episodes twice. If I do, my bad. Because, to be perfectly honest, it's been months since I recorded the last Decade DenziBlitz episode, but I just finished watching Decade this morning, so I wanted to go ahead and get my thoughts on camera before this goes up. So, and before they leave my mind, obviously. So, let's talk about it. I've got 3 two-parters to discuss real quick with you, and then we've got a movie to talk about, and a little bit of really bizarre Decade history. So, the 3 two-parters, we have the worlds of Black and Black RX, we have Amazon's world, and then we have what is presumably the last world that we will visit, the world of the Great Rider War. Starting with Black and Black RX's world. This is, with the exception of Momotaro's voice actor for the Den-O portion of Decade, this is the only time the original actor comes back. The actor who played Black and Black RX, who is one of my favorite Rider actors, and I feel terribly ashamed because I can't remember his name at the moment. But he does return to reprise his role as both Black and Black RX, although Decade takes a really interesting approach to these 2 characters, and notice I did say 2 characters. So, in the original television series, Black and Black RX, it's the same character. Our hero originally starts as Kamen Rider Black. At the beginning of the sequel series, Black RX, a few years have passed. He hasn't lost his powers, he hasn't given them up, but a new bad guy appears in the form of the Crisis Empire. And when he attempts to transform into Black to fight them off, something happens, he gets captured, he basically gets jettisoned into space, and the item that grants him his powers, the King Stone, splits in 2 and basically mutates its power and becomes Black RX. The RX basically standing for Resurrected. It's the new version of Kamen Rider Black. Now, in the original show, they carry on some allusions from time to time that, yes, it's the same character, it's the same world. All the Showa-era series has occupied the same world. Well, here, Black and Black RX are treated as different characters, different worlds, where their stories have taken them in different directions. Where on one side, our character, Minami Kotaro, becomes Black, and in another world becomes Black RX. With the world of Black RX being brighter, upbeat, more optimistic, much like his series, and the world of Black being much more dark and foreboding and gritty, to use the buzzword that the kids like to use these days. Much like the Black television series, which was a very serious tone to the entire series, and one of my all-time favorite Kamen Rider series, as I might add. These are my 2 favorite episodes of Decade, largely because I love the character Minami Kotaro. I love Black and Black RX, although I haven't seen all of Black RX all the way through, but I have seen Black and I loved it. In fact, I would probably go so far as to say it's my 2nd all-time favorite Kamen Rider series. But the way they treat these 2 worlds, and ultimately giving you this dream team-up that in the Showa-era continuity, where it is all one world from the original Kamen Rider series all the way through the end of Kamen Rider J, the movie, it's one world. This team-up could never happen. You could never have Black and Black RX together, side by side, fighting the bad guys. And pretty much from this point forward, In the Kamen Rider franchise, Black and Black RX would be treated as separate characters. They're in fact counted as, they've always been counted as separate entries in the numbered Kamen Riders, but they would actually be treated from this point on as separate characters, separate heroes, even though it's the same person. But these two episodes treat each world very well. They also heavily feature Apollo Geist, who is a bad guy from Kamen Rider X. And they mention the world of Kamen Rider X. Even though we never spend a great deal of time there, we're there basically in a flashback. They do set up this version of Apollo Geist in those two episodes. And we get to see the evolution of Tsukasa in that he treats these people as comrades, willing to put his life on the line, indeed risk his life for Natsumi, not through a fight, but through the willing sacrifice of part of his life force, giving it up through Apollo Geist's Perfector, which is a device he uses to maintain his life force by draining that of other people. Tsukasa uses it on himself to give part of his life force to Natsumi after she has fallen victim to Apollo Geist. So, really, really cool two-parter, and does a good bit to put over Kaito. There we go. Kamen Rider The End, where we see him willingly hand over the treasure that is Apollo Geist's Perfector after he's proven his point. I'll get it first. I'm better than you. Now you may use it. So it kind of gives you some insight into him, where he's not a cold, heartless son of a gun. He just wants to prove that he's the best in all things as he goes. The World of Amazon is the next two-parter, and if the Black RX two-parter is my favorite, then the Amazon two-parter is probably low on the list. I said earlier on that we weren't going to be doing an essential Kamen Rider Decade like we did an essential Zyuranger. And the reason is pretty simple, because there's no need for an essential decade. For better or worse, almost every episode of Kamen Rider Decade is essential to the overall story. He either gets new powers, meets new riders, travels to a new world. The very nature of the series and the fact that it is only 31 episodes makes it so that you pretty much need to watch it all. With that said, you could probably skip the Amazon two-parter if you really wanted to. I don't know what inspired them to choose Amazon as the character for this two-parter. They do use the world of Amazon to show us a world where Dai-Shocker has taken over, and what the world might look like if Dai-Shocker won. Beyond that, and a really cool reinterpretation of the Ten-Faced Demon, the final boss from the Amazon television series. There's not a whole lot here. The actor who plays Amazon does a fine job, but I think the character wasn't written nearly as well. Part of the charm of the original Amazon television series, which is among the, I want to say it is the shortest all-time Kamen Rider television series at, I think, 24 episodes. Part of the charm is that Amazon is a fish out of water. He is basically Tarzan if Tarzan could transform into a superhero. And so what you wind up with is initially is a person who can't even speak. His Japanese is a second language almost, compared basically to the language of the jungle, and he has to learn it over the course of the series. By the time the series gets to its second half, he can speak Japanese, but very broken. So you'd get none of that, really, out of this version of Amazon. And so I really didn't care for it. It's a nice little story. It hits the points from the Amazon television series of friendship and how that can conquer pretty much anything and so on. But beyond that, it frankly is not very good. You could skip it, be perfectly honest. Unless you just really want to see Decade fighting alongside Amazon, and you really want to see that costume and the new version of the Ten-Faced Demon fighting with modern effects and all that. There's really no need. You can see most of that in the later Rider movies. Finally, we're going to get to, actually, we're not going to jump to the finale yet. We're going to talk about the movie, All Riders versus Dai-Shocker. This was the big major motion picture to do around Kamen Rider Decade, where it would be every main rider from Rider 1 through Decade in a single film. It also served as the introduction of Kamen Rider Double, who would show up the following year. Well, I shouldn't say the following year, but after the end of the Kamen Rider Decade television series. It also starts the tradition of the next Kamen Rider appearing in the previous Kamen Riders movie. The All Riders vs. Dai-Shocker is, frankly, the story itself is a mess. It's a fun film to watch, but if you're looking at it for the story and for character development, you probably should go somewhere else. If you're showing up to see a whole lot of rider costumes and a whole lot of villain costumes and some really cool fights, then awesome, you're gonna love it. And this was the first time, it's a cliche now, we take it for granted in 2017, but in 2009, the idea of seeing all of these heroes together on screen fighting side by side was unique. It had not been done up to this point. It was a throwback to the older Showa-era Kamen Rider movies where you would have several of the riders team up. For instance, there was the movie Five Riders vs. King Dark, which was one of the Kamen Rider X movies, and it had the Double Riders, V3, Riderman, and X. There was, I believe it's 8 Riders versus the Galaxy King, which is the Sky Rider movie. There's the finale of Black RX, in which every Kamen Rider before him shows up to help him in the final battle. Prior to that, in 1984, there's Birth of the 10th, All Riders Together, and it's Kamen Riders 1 through 10, so from Ichigo to Z-Cross. Well, this is the first time, for one, that all of the Heisei Riders have been in one place, all the main ones, but it's also the first time that they've crossed over with their Showa counterparts, so a whole lot of fun from that standpoint. We get to see new interpretations of some characters. We get to see a new version of Ambassador Hell. We get to see a new version of Professor Shinigami, from both of those from the original Kamen Rider television series. We find out that Professor Shinigami is actually the grandpa, and apparently has been the entire time. It's just that he's more or less reformed most of the time. We get to see a new version of Shadow Moon with a new human identity. The premise is that Tsukasa Decade is the leader of Dai-Shocker and has been from the word go. He just didn't remember it. Part of the amnesia from the beginning of the television series. Through the machinations of Shadow Moon, he remembers that he's the great leader. He remembers that he has a sister. That's another plot point. He remembers that he apparently lives in V3's mansion from Kamen Rider the Next. They love to reuse sets at Toei. And he remembers, he doesn't remember V3 from the Next, just for the record, but it's the same set. And he remembers this great plan to have the Great Rider Battle, where all the riders will face off in one-on-one combat, not unlike Highlander, until there's only one remaining, and that one will be the most powerful rider, and all the other riders will be defeated and weakened. So there you go. And no one seems to think twice about this idea of just a tournament to see who's the strongest rider. It doesn't seem to faze anybody. And somehow you have this tournament to determine the one final strongest rider that winds up in a 6-man tag at the end, with Decade Dien and Kuga, surprise, surprise, versus Black V3 and Super 1, I think it is, are the last 3 on the other side. And so it's the 3 Showa riders versus the 3 latest Heisei riders, well, Kuga and the two latest Heisei riders. Um, so it's an interesting story. The Shadow Moon double crosses Tsukasa. Tsukasa, after his big reveal as the Great Leader, he double crosses him. Um, Big fight at the end with all the riders coming to Decade and Dian's aid against the myriad of monsters from virtually every show across the franchise. Everyone gets their cool moments. Kuga gets brainwashed and becomes the ultimate Kuga, which is a new costume they made just for the movie. Um, there's Jay shows up as a giant at the very end because that's all Kamen Rider Jay seems to be able to do these days is show up as the big giant Kamen Rider. We see King Dark, and we see a 25, well, I guess, yeah, 25 person rider kick against Shadow Moon. Seems a bit overkill. And we see DN, or Decade's final form ride, where DN uses that power on Decade, and Decade turns into a giant Decade driver so that Jay can transform into Decade. Doesn't make much sense, really. This movie falls firmly into the look too close and you see the zippers category of tokusatsu. If you sit back and you watch it for what it is, which is a spectacle, it's a lot of fun. Among the spectacle Kamen Rider movies, it's probably one of the better ones. But in regards to it being a cohesive story, it's a bit of a mess. Fun watch, definitely recommend it. It falls in between episodes 29 and 30 of Kamen Rider, or Decade, the television series. So, if you're trying to watch it in order, that's where you would stop and watch. It's after he's met all the Kamen Riders. So, anything prior to that, you're going to see some stuff that won't make much sense. Then we get to the last two episodes. Now, the last two episodes of Decade were controversial and a mess. To be perfectly honest. They're not a mess until afterwards. When they aired, they were fine. They became a mess later. Basically, it takes us back to the beginning of the series. At the very beginning of the series, Wataru Kurenai, the real Kamen Rider Kiva, shows up and tells Decade that he must destroy all the riders. He's told that's his mission. There are 9 rider worlds. He will destroy every rider. And through this, he will save the world. It is only through destruction that things can be created. But instead, he has befriended all the riders. He feels that that's what a rider does. Is a rider is a hero, and that destroying other riders means he's not a hero. Well, when we get to this world, we see Tsukasa and Yusuke and Natsumi stumble across a fight between the riders of Kiva's world and the riders of Blade's world. Now, these are the AR Kamen Riders, the alternate reality riders. Through the fight, we see 2 riders, Ixa and Liangle, both get killed. We see the AR versions of Wataru and Kazuya get very upset, scream bloody vengeance, and swear that they will never work together. Basically each world is trying to destroy the other one as the worlds are merging, that Blade and Kiva's worlds are becoming one, and that which world will be dominant once they merge will only be determined through this fight and through destroying the opposing Kamen Riders. Again, doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but the way the series, at first blush, but the way the series has portrayed the riders themselves as sort of the defining elements of each world, the riders and their villains, in that regard, perhaps it does make sense. If that's the linchpin of the world, then the surviving riders and villains would define the next world, the combined merged world. So maybe it does make a certain degree of sense. Of course, Yusuke and Tsukasa and company try to dissuade them. Riders are supposed to be friends. They're not supposed to fight one another. And from there, you wind up with a good bit of talking back and forth, trying to keep this from happening, trying to keep the riders from fighting one another. Ultimately, we even wind up seeing Kiva and the Fangire versus Blade and the Undead, where the riders and monsters from each world are fighting on the same side to destroy all of the opposing worlds' characters. So very odd in that regard. We do get to see the real Kazuya from Blade, or Kazuma. I'm sorry, I get the name confused on occasion. But we see the real Kazuma show up from Kamen Rider Blade to talk to this world's Hibiki, Asumu, from the AR version of Hibiki's world, and say, do you really want to save the world? And we wind up with the riders attacking Decade, and I'm being told Decade's the one you have to destroy. Wataru even shows up at one point in episode 31 and tells him, no, you made a mistake. You were supposed to destroy all the riders. You weren't supposed to become their friend. So now, in order to stop this catastrophe, we have to stop you. And presumably by the end of the deal, all of the real Kamen Riders, all the real world riders, because all of the AR riders start to disappear. But presumably all the real ones, because we do see Wataru Kurenai and we do see Kazuma from Blade, the television series, both transform into their respective riders. Presumably, the riders we see at the final battle, which Natsumi has been having nightmares about and realizes that that's what is about to happen, are summoned. Apollo Geist shows up. There is a little subplot where he becomes a Fangire, becomes Super Apollo Geist, and winds up with the AR riders siding with Decade, going, no, we don't want to fight each other. Riders are heroes. And so eventually Blade stands beside Decade during his first encounter with Apollo Geist, and then during the final battle with Apollo Geist, DN, Decade, Kuga, Hibiki, and Kiva, the AR versions, all fight Apollo Geist and win, with DN solidifying his role no longer as rival but as comrade to Kamen Rider Decade. But when the final Rider War starts and the real Heisei Kamen Riders attack Decade, is sort of where it all falls apart. We do get to see the big final battle commence, but then we get a POV shot in which from DN, in which DN runs into his own point of view, points the DN driver his pistol directly in Decade's face. They have a moment of realization. They say each other's name, Tsukasa, Kaito, and then DN shoots Decade square in the face. Smash cut over to Natsumi yelling no, or Tsukasa, or something along those lines. And cut to the finale. And what you wind up with is next time on Kamen Rider Decade, which is weird because there was no next episode. Episode 31 is it. It's the finale. The next time was for the movie. Now, in concept, this is a tremendous idea. We're going to end the television series on a cliffhanger. We're going to show the real series finale as a feature film. They're going to have to go to theaters and pay to see it. It's actually not a bad idea at all, and it's one that, I'll be honest, I'm surprised more television series over the years haven't tried to pull. But the next time on bumper that you see, which is essentially a trailer for the movie, promises the following. That there's 2 decades. That we are going to meet the real Tsukasa. That we're going to get revealed Narutaki, the Onore Dikedo, that guy with the fedora and the trench coat who stalks around and even in the last 2 episodes shows up to explain to Decade, no, this is what's going on. This is what you need to do. I don't like you. I'll never be your friend, but you got to do this. So Naritaki jumps on Decade's back and says, "It is time to reveal my true identity." Um, we see we see the real form of Kivala, Kivala's true form, and we see the Kamen Rider Kivala suit. Um, there's so much that we see in this after trailer that really gets you psyched for this. Really is going to be the end of the series. It's going to be big. It's going to be awesome. None of it happened. None of it. Nothing you see in that trailer actually appears in the movie for whatever reason. What would have been the Kamen Rider Decade finale movie became Kamen Rider Movie War, which was a team-up movie with Decade and Double. It basically leads you to the conclusion that the world of the Great Rider War is Double's world. I'm not going to go too much into that movie at this point, because, frankly, we're going to save it if we ever talk about Double. Here on the DenziBlitz or on DenziCaster. But literally, nothing that you see there winds up in the actual series finale, which is the decade half of Movie War. And the decade half of Movie War is kind of like the All Riders vs. Dai-Shocker movie. It's fun, but it's a mess. And it doesn't necessarily wrap up the series the way you would want. It never explains why everyone thinks Tsukasa's the devil, including Naritaki. It never explains who Naritaki really is. It never explains the two Tsukasa mention and visual from the Next Time trailer that was in episode 31. And it doesn't match up to the end of 31. The last thing you see in the television series is Decade getting shot in the face. Point blank. This close. It makes no sense. So, at a later point, the folks at Kamen Rider Decade Toei did create 2 special edition episodes. There was a special edition episode 30 and a special edition episode 31 that were meant to sync up to Movie War better. That's not what we watched for this, because I wanted to watch the series as I saw it to begin with, as it originally aired. But they did re-edit the final 2 episodes to try to make them match Movie War better. It is what it is. Final verdict. Decade is a lot of fun as a series. I called it when we started the Whitman Sampler Box of Kamen Rider, and it really is. Any writer from Decade to Kiva, you get a feel for what those shows were like without necessarily getting spoilers or getting too in-depth with those shows' characters. You will still meet those characters on those shows. It'll be a fresh journey. You even get touches of worlds like Black and Black RX. Even then, even though it's the same actor, it's not spoilery in that regard. We get to see the world of Amazon, which is nothing like his television series, for better or worse. But the overall story of the show, is a crossover. The entire show, it's a tribute. It's a love letter to everything Kamen Rider was. The story tries to come across as it's the journey, not the destination, that really matters. And great saying, but I'm not sure the show gets that across. It's not the actors' fault. I thought the actors did a tremendous job. I thought the action in the show was quite good and managed to capture each individual show's writers and style very well. But the story is where the show overall, the actual writing, is where the show probably falls down a little bit. There is no payoff. There's no payoff in the series finale, and the promised payoff in the trailer for the movie never happened. So in that regard, Decade may be one of the least satisfying Kamen Rider series of all time, because you get a 31 episode setup, you get a preview of the punchline, and they never deliver it. It's still one of my favorite shows for everything up to the ending, but the ending itself is lackluster, and I'm probably being kind. So, with all that said, I hope you've enjoyed this look at Kamen Rider Decade here on the DenziBlitz. Couple of quick announcements, couple of quick things. We will recommence with the DenziBlitz in 2 weeks' time. It's not going to come up because, as you probably noticed, this is a Thursday. The DenziBlitz will return a week from Tuesday. Tuesday, we're going to have the second half of our Kamen Rider Suits roll call, where it's 5 through 1. And then we'll have another DenziCaster episode on Thursday. That, frankly, is just due to editing concerns and shooting schedules and whatnot. But a week from this coming Tuesday, we are going to start our next series here on the DenziBlitz, and that is Tokusou Sentai Deca Ranger. Now, you will hear me mention this in those early episodes, the first 5 episodes of the Deca Ranger DenziBlitz, which we've already recorded, that we apologize. Those episodes were originally shot on Facebook and uploaded to Facebook for the original run of DenziBlitz. So the first 5 episodes, the audio and video quality is going to be a little suspect. I apologize. There was really no way for us to get around that. However, the second half of Deca Ranger will be brand new stuff that we'll shoot fresh, because I'm still going to watch all those episodes again, which is going to be a lot of fun because Deca Ranger is an awesome show. Also, we do hope that you go over and check out the ECS store at cafepress.com/ECS Network. Pick up a t-shirt or something else. Help us out here at the channel. It really does help us out a whole lot when you pick up something there and sport the colors of your favorite ECS Network shows. All proceeds from that go to the channel, not a person. Nobody gets paid off of this channel. Finally, check us out on Facebook. It's facebook.com/DenziCaster. We're also on Periscope and Twitter and Instagram. Check out all those great places. You'll see all that pop up when I'm done talking. Until next time, folks, here on the DenziBlitz, when we will start taking a look at Tokusou Sentai Deca Ranger. I'm Mike, and we'll see you around.